This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 113. I just want to remind you all before we get started to go to haulinassetsllc.com, where you can find past episodes, show notes, the works. It's all there. You can also find us on Facebook, where you can make comments that we occasionally talk about, like we will today. All right, so now that is out of the way, I am Craig, your host. Over there, he is Chris. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
You know, not too bad. Not too bad. My beloved Mariners are in the playoffs for the first time in 21 years, and I could not be more excited about it.
I'm surprised we were able to pull you away from the TV to record.
The magic of DVR.
Yeah. So I know 13 is an unlucky number.
Sure.
Is 113 unlucky?
As in episode 113?
Yeah, as in episode 113.
I don't know about unlucky. You know what? It's a lucky number, Chris, because we were lucky enough to get, we were lucky enough to be asked to do a little soul searching, right? How's that?
That's a good way to put it.
All right. So today we're talking about, are we staying true to our purpose? That is the purpose of today's episode. And this could, Chris, reading through the notes, this could be a bit of a long one.
I was thinking the same thing as I was kind of preparing the outline and everything for it. It could be a long one.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, who knows?
Some of the things that we're going to talk about, we may just skim, because there's actually a couple things here that probably deserve, not probably, there are a couple things here that deserve their own episode.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we'll hit those, but reserve the bulk of the commentary for a separate episode.
Yep.
Fair enough. All right. So we will, we got called out on a comment. And we're going to address that comment today. But Chris, before we do, anything else that you want to bring up before we get started? The traditional, how was your week?
I brought you a present.
Yeah, that's right.
I did. I brought you a present.
In this giant box.
We haven't talked about it yet.
Okay.
You don't even know what you know what the present is, but you don't know the backstory to it.
Chris brought me a box of macaroni and cheese, like any good friend. And
not a box, a case.
A case. That's
of
true.
Mac and cheese.
Okay. And this is the part where you have to ask the trucking company owner, did this wink wink fall off the back of a truck, Chris? What is the story?
Not exactly.
What is it? All right, I'm dying to know.
So, first and foremost, your box of mac and cheese is courtesy of Trudy.
Trudy, okay.
One of our drivers.
Oh, thank you, Trudy.
Yeah, thank Trudy. Trudy calls Nate, and then Nate calls me. This just happened yesterday.
Okay.
Nate calls me and says, "Hey, Trudy's delivering a truckload of mac and cheese to our local distributor that's literally like less than 10 minutes away from my house." And the shipper had put 2 pallets extra on the truck. And to complicate matters, the 2 pallets are the wrong brand. It's a brand of mac and cheese. Like this is the generic, what you would buy in the grocery store mac and cheese, but it's not the local generic. It's a generic from back east.
Oh, okay. So is it like not like Kroger or something? It's something else.
But it'd be like the Kroger brand.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, probably the Kroger brand's probably made in the same plant.
I'm sure they all are.
The same thing. Yeah. So anyway, the receiver says, "Hey, we're not taking this." And so we call the broker and figure out, well, what do you want us to do with it? And finally the answer comes back.
Whatever you want.
Get rid of it.
Oh my gosh.
So we end up with
2 pallets.
2 pallets of mac and cheese. And so there you go. You've got a case of mac and cheese.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, indeed. Thank you, Trudy, for the mac and cheese. And thank you, broker, and whoever screwed up the order. My kids are going to be eating like kings, like Kroger kings, for this is a couple weeks worth.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Wow.
You should be okay.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to starve for the next week or two.
It's going straight into long-term food storage. So that when out in Utah, okay, we're recording in Utah, we're always talking about the big one, the earthquake, right? Because we're right on a continental fault line. And so everybody's waiting for the big one. And when that hits, we're going to have mac and cheese for days. Yep. Cold mac and cheese, Chris. All right. So Anything else you want to talk about?
I was just going to mention that we've got 2 trucks sitting for the first time in a while.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Well, let's see. What did happen? One is a story for later on down the road.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be a very good episode at some point, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet. This is probably
it's too emotional.
It's too emotional. It's and a few other things. But it will be a very interesting episode when it happens.
Okay.
And the second thing, we had a driver who we lost on. Well, he's okay, but he had some health issues and had to step away from trucking for a while.
Right.
So 2 trucks, which the last time this happened, if you remember, was when we added our 3rd truck to our fleet.
Right.
And all of a sudden we have 3 trucks, but only 1 operating. That was scarier than 2 trucks now. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with October's numbers.
Right.
Because of that.
Yeah. Like you said, not as scary. 66% of your fleet sitting is a lot scarier than 20%.
Correct.
Right. So yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, I guess I will look forward to hearing those stories at some point. But you know what story I want to hear today, Chris?
What story?
I want to hear the story of you getting called out in the comments. And you, and me, but really everybody knows I'm just like some guy, right? That's the benefit of being some guy, is everybody gets to call you out, and I just get to keep asking for my face on the side of the truck and never getting it. And so we both have our roles in this podcast.
I got called on the carpet by Eric, and I actually really appreciate it because he had he gave probably the longest Facebook comment I've ever seen in my life. It was on episode 105, but it was really well thought out. Like you could tell he put some thought into it and brings up a lot of really good points. And so in today's episode, we're going to try to address most of those points and talk a little bit about them today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you mentioned it, I went back and looked it up and read the whole comment. It really is a great comment, but it definitely is one of those, like, it'll turn your face red.
Yeah, and just so you know, like, so as I was preparing for this podcast episode, I talked to a few people about it. I did the outline, one of them being Chet, and I sent Chet the comments.
Chet being my brother who works with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sent Chet the comments and the outline for kind of what I planned on talking about and how I planned on talking about or addressing the comments. And Chet's all like, after he read through everything, that he sends me a text, I really like Eric. So Eric, nice. What I need is
you've got fans, buddy.
You've got fans. I need your picture so that I can put it on a t-shirt and put I'm Eric's biggest fan on
give
it to Chet.
That's funny.
So Eric, if you're listening and you've got some time, shoot me a picture, and I'm going to get Chet a t-shirt made with your face on it. And
an image release, yeah. I don't think you're going to be selling I'm Eric's biggest fan t-shirts.
I just want to give one to Chet.
All right, so tell us about the comment, Chris. Give us, because like you said, it's a long, broad comment, but give us kind of the gist of what was in the comment, and then we'll dive into the specifics. So
basically, and I think really kind of this first, I'm going to read like one of the first parts of his comment. I think it kind of envelops the whole spirit of what he's saying, because he actually goes through and he makes a bunch of different points, and that's what we're going to try to address is the points. But here, I'll read this. So it says, Eric says, I don't think the podcast has been living up to the promise of the first year or so of episodes, not until the latest one, that is. And I think that was episode 104 that he's referring to.
Listener questions. Yep.
Yeah. He said the teaser still says, follow Chris as he, but it's not that anymore, is it? It's not even Chris's trucking company anymore, is it? He goes on to say it's more or less something that he dabbles with while someone else actually runs the company on a day-to-day basis, right? At least as far as I can tell, that's what's going on. And so he's talking about Nate. Nate.
Right, we've mentioned Nate.
Runs for the most part the day-to-day operations. And so basically what his premises is the podcast, is Haulin Assets.
You just put a G on it, and I will
Haulin Assets.
Haunt you forever.
Are we staying true to our purpose? That's really kind of what this boils down to.
And so maybe we start by talking about what was the purpose when we started. And then we can talk about whether that has kind of morphed along the way, right? The idea, and as Eric says, it's still in that kind of trailer audio that my dulcet tones provide. Follow Chris as he, takes to the road and, starts his own trucking company. See what it's like to do it on your own, to run on your own authority. And so the purpose of it was to see, okay, so starting from zero, what is it like to buy a truck, get your authority, hit the road, get loads, work with brokers and shippers and all that stuff, and make a go of being an owner operator. And that is what it was for the first year. It was you on the road doing those things. And we did talk about, hey, eventually this is going to grow. We want to talk about what it's like to grow your company, grow your fleet, do something that's not just you on the road, right? So it has grown and morphed a little bit from what you were doing in that first year. I would say those first, what would that be? 60, 70 episodes or so? Or maybe not that many, something like that.
The first year was, we basically recorded once a week. So yeah, right. It was 50 plus episodes.
So those first 50 episodes, I would say before we even get into a lot of what Eric said, if you are in that position where you're just starting out, you're just thinking about doing it, if this or, one of these later episodes is what you're coming in on, then go back. Those first 50 episodes still hold up. Some of the specifics might have changed about what's going on in the market and what's going on in the world. COVID hit, that sort of thing. So there are some specifics that have changed, but
the principles
are still there.
Are there,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. So how am I doing? That's my take on that's where we were. Things have shifted. So go on, Chris.
So things have changed. Obviously, we're not a one truck operation with me driving anymore.
Right.
It's completely morphed. And really all along, the purpose of this podcast, of me doing this, was to help people understand how to run a business, and specifically, obviously, a trucking business. And I think for the most part, we've stuck to that.
Mm-hmm.
Have we always done the best? Has every episode been the greatest episode ever? Could we have done better on certain episodes? Yeah, probably.
Hey, slow down. We're awesome. Every episode, forever.
Okay, every episode's mostly good.
There you go. Close enough. I'll take it.
50% of the time, it works 100% of the time.
There you go, exactly.
So I think for the most part, I feel like we've done a decent job with sticking with that. But let's let everybody kind of be their own judge. We'll talk through this, and you can be the judge of, are we kind of holding true to our values? Are we sticking with the purpose of the podcast? And Eric brings out some points throughout his comments, and we'll address each one of those. And there's explanations for most of it, and why hopefully bring everybody into the thought process of why we've been doing things the way we've been doing, and explain some things.
All right. Sounds good. So what do you want to address first? He says, he brings up that teaser line, follow Chris as he ... right? But he says, it's not that anymore, is it? It's not even Chris's trucking company. Maybe we start with something like that. What's your role these days on a day-to-day basis?
I think that's a good place to start. So yes, Nate has come in. We brought Nate on as a partner in the business after the business was almost 2 years old, not quite 2 years old. And the whole reason behind that was because at that point, and we can answer, we'll leave it till later. We're going to answer another one of the questions about kind of business ownership and how it's structured later on in this episode. But at the beginning, essentially, it was me and Chet, probably 10% Chet, 90% me.
Right.
I've, even before we started Haulin Assets, Motor Carry HQ already existed. iThrive Funding already existed. Tracking Assets already existed. I had all these other businesses that were already going. And so that hasn't changed. I still have those businesses, and we brought Haulin Assets on, and I was probably dedicated 80% of my time to Haulin Assets that first year, where now I probably don't dedicate quite that much. We brought Nate on because we knew if we really wanted to grow this business and make it bigger, it wasn't going to happen with just me and Chet, because Chet and I were already just spread too thin.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole purpose of bringing Nate on. And so now so to answer the question, do I have an active role in the business? Absolutely. I still have an active role in the business. Nate has a certain set of responsibilities, things that he's kind of in charge of, and then I've got a certain set of responsibilities that I'm in charge of. So Nate does most of the day-to-day operations. He does most of the driver management, where I spend most of my time. I still take the lead on financials. I do all the financial stuff with the business.
Because you're not allergic to spreadsheets.
I'm not allergic to spreadsheets. Yeah. I do 90% of it. Nate does some. He does some of the data entry stuff, and he's getting more proficient in QuickBooks and understanding how all that stuff works. But I do 90% of the financials. I do most of the, tracking down money for loans or for, the financing on equipment and the cash flow and all that other kind of stuff. And so we still do that. And on top of that, Nate and I, we've talked about this in the past, are both in the National Guard. So there are times when he's gone and I fill in and do a lot of what he would normally be doing because he's in the Guard. Then when he goes on vacation, I'll handle a lot of that stuff. And so we've kind of got each other's backs at all times. So I am still actively engaged in the business. And some days I may spend 8 hours in the business. Other days I may spend 0 hours in the business. But all in all, I bet you I still spend 3 to 4 hours a day on Haulin Assets.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Including yesterday, we had 2 pallets of mac and cheese on a truck that our driver couldn't really go anywhere until we got rid of that mac and cheese. And so I went and...
Who's the guy they call?
Yeah. Nate and I both had to go scramble to help get all those pallets off that truck. I mean, It's not hard to get rid of a bunch of mac and cheese, but we still, it took a couple hours of each of our day. And on top of that, after that, we went to lunch with another potential driver. I'm still really heavily involved in screening drivers and
the hiring process generally.
Yeah.
All right. So that answers that question. You are still involved in a day-to-day business, but your role has definitely morphed from when you were behind the wheel on a day-to-day basis.
Yep,
and we always knew that would happen. That was kind of the goal, was to grow the company such that you could then play to your strengths, which, as we established in earlier episodes, you're a good driver, but there are great drivers out there, right? You want to hire some great drivers.
Absolutely.
So,
and to kind of expound on that a little bit. So how do you relate that to, somebody else who's thinking about taking a similar journey? I think you just replace Nate with, an actual owner operator that transitions into a fleet manager.
Right.
Instead of at the point where we hired Nate, that other person that wants to go through this similar path would just jump out of the truck and essentially jump into the role that Nate has taken.
Right. So if this were your only business, you wouldn't have a Nate.
I probably wouldn't have had a Nate.
Right.
Yep.
So you just needed somebody else because you got a lot of irons and a lot of fires.
Yes.
Okay, good. So anything else from that one? I think we've addressed that comment so far. Do we want to go to the next section of Eric's? Yep. I will read this in my best Eric impression. Okay. So, Eric, please forgive me. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. I will not do an impression. I was annoyed, says Eric, when Chris first expanded the fleet, in part because I remembered an early episode. And Chris, this is such a good point.
It is a good point.
I had forgotten about this. I remembered an early episode where he warned owners that they should add at most 1 truck per year because otherwise they might run into insurmountable cash flow problems and could lose their business. As if he thought his own advice meant nothing, Chris added more than 1 truck at a time and talked about doing so in a very cavalier way. To me, it was a good thing when Chris reported that he bounced a check because he restored his credibility a little bit, but although that would have been a good teaching moment, Chris didn't really say much about it other than that he was embarrassed about what happened. Okay, so a couple of things here. Yeah, we can talk about the bounce check and whatnot, but it's a great point. That is a piece of advice that you gave early on in the podcast, and now here you are going, hey, here's my 3rd truck this quarter, right?
Yeah.
And so I had forgotten that you had mentioned that, or else I would have probably called you out on it or asked some questions, what's going on there. So does your original advice still hold? Do you want to amend that advice, or do you want to or is your situation different enough that you feel like your advice still holds for the majority of owners the majority of the time?
So I think it's the latter. I think probably a better way to phrase that and word that is you really shouldn't grow faster than what you can manage. And I think for most people, that's probably going to be, at least early on in the first few years, no more than 1 truck a year. And even I would say we've probably grown a little faster than we should have. So
I've been astonished sitting in this seat. I've been shocked at how fast it's gone. It's been a little crazy.
And I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but let me talk about how I think we should have done it versus how we actually did it. So one, to expand a little bit on, I don't think you should grow faster than you can manage. A lot of the times we think we can grow faster than we really can. So I would say you really have to do some soul searching here on what you can manage. I think I can I don't think I can grow a little bit faster because I've got deeper pockets than most people. Like I've got 3 other businesses that are successful businesses and are doing well financially that can kind of help, like I've got a little more cash than most people do.
And this is something we've tried to be transparent about, even in the early stages that you're trying for the most part, 95% of the way, you're trying to go down the route that, any average owner operator would, but there are some things that you do have something of a leg up on the others.
And that being one of them, just kind of the deeper pockets that has helped me. If this was, again, let's go back to, if this was my only business and I didn't have other businesses that could kind of help out a little bit financially, like a bridge loan to help purchase a trailer until permanent financing came through. I mean, that's something that we've done. Then it'd be a different story. So we've been able to help out with some cash. The thing that you have to kind of think of is every time you add a new truck, you've got to have about $20,000 to $30,000 of operating capital just to help that truck through the first month before you actually start getting revenue. You actually start getting checks for the work that truck did. And so you're essentially covering all the fuel expense, the insurance, the truck payment, the driver's salary, all of that for a month before you actually start seeing money in the bank for the work that truck did.
Right.
And that's, you've got to be careful with that.
Floating that is difficult.
It's difficult.
So,
yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you tell me about the rate of growth? Because it does feel to me like, year one, it was you behind the wheel. Okay, great. And then you bought a second truck. We're easing into things. And then it seemed like year 3 just went nuts, right?
It did. So we one truck the whole first year. The end of the second year, we bought our second truck. Like probably 9 months into the second year, we bought our second truck. And then at the beginning of the third year, through that entire third year, I think we added 5 trucks.
It's bananas.
Which became bananas. Maybe it was only 4.
And so to set the stage a little bit, that was as we started year 3, which would have been 2021 or 20. Yeah, it was 2020.
Year 3. The beginning of year 3 was 2020, like May of 2021.
Okay, all right. So this is a year after kind of COVID has been a thing.
Yeah.
And, I'm just trying to set my own mental stage for what was going on at the time. Okay, all right.
So, what kind of happened there is we added the trucks to that pace. And what I think we really probably should have done is we probably should have added another truck. Like instead of doing just 1 the second year, we probably should have added 2 the second year and then added 1 fewer in the third year.
So 2 in year 2 and then 4 in year 3.
Yeah. Or 3, probably 3 in year 3. So 1 in year 1, 2 in year. So at the end of year 1, we'd have 1 truck. At the end of year 2, we'd have 3 trucks. And then the end of year 4, we'd have 6 or 7 trucks. Okay. Probably 6 would have been better.
Right. So this is what Haulin Assets should have done.
That's what we
with your hindsight. You're still not saying, hey, that is the rate of growth that most people should go for.
And And there are situations where it may make sense to grow even faster than that. But you're gonna have to have somebody with even deeper pockets than I do. Like I think we kind of maxed ourselves out at what we were at.
I mean, yeah, again, sitting in the seat I'm in, I could see kind of the stress points as they came along.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I would have done. And part of the reason it was hard to predict things. COVID kind of blew everything up. And one of the reasons I think we decided to be a little bit more aggressive than we really were is because we had to order our trucks a year in advance. And so we're trying to predict, okay, a year from now, how many trucks do we want to have coming online? And we weren't able to predict the timing of when those trucks arrived. Like if we could have spread the trucks out a little bit more, it probably would have made things way easier. But we had trucks come in bunches. We'd go 3 months without adding a truck, and then all of a sudden we'd add 3 trucks in a month and a half. And it just, and that became incredibly challenging to manage.
Right. I mean, like you said, 20, 30,000 per truck in operating expenses to get it out on the road. That's a lot. And which, by the way, it goes back to the very first truck you bought. You know, that was about the cost it was to get the first truck out on the road. So that doesn't go away as the fleet grows. Yeah.
And so to kind of answer that second part of that point that Eric made is that created our serious cash flow issues. And in all honesty, like we still haven't been completely, even now aren't completely out of the cash flow issues. Like we'll have a week or two where our balance on our checking account gets uncomfortably low. And like he mentioned, we'd bounced a check once, I think it was a little over a year ago at this point, and we haven't been in that same scenario exactly, but we've still been way tighter than we feel comfortable with. Right. And it's managing that cash flow. It's tight. It's hard. You've got to, I would like to say that the world works perfectly and in absolutes, but a big chunk of that is we couldn't time it. Like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if you wanted a truck this month, you could say, hey, I've got my $30,000 saved up. I'm ready to go buy a truck. I go to the dealership and I buy a truck, and I probably can walk off the lot with a truck.
Right.
You just couldn't do that. And we couldn't time. We could sell it. Hey, we want 1 truck in the first quarter, 1 truck in the second quarter, 1 truck in the third quarter, 1 truck in the fourth quarter, and tell the dealership that that's what they want. But they're going to give us the truck, and we have to take it when it comes, or we don't get it. And that's just, it made it really unpredictable and really hard to manage that cash flow. And that's part of the reason, like, how do you predict that that's what's going to happen? Like that market doesn't, it's different than it's ever really been.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Chris, do you feel like you've said your piece on that bit? Should we move on to Eric's next comment?
Let's move on to the next one. Yeah.
So he has another comment right hot on the heels of that. It says, I've heard that being a single truck operation is all about managing your truck, but when it comes to more than 1 truck, it becomes a matter of managing people. And I think longtime listeners of this podcast have seen that come true for you, right?
Yeah. And I think he's absolutely correct when it comes to that comment. It is. When you're an owner operator, it's about managing your truck. As soon as you step out of that role as an owner operator, it becomes really more about managing people. And in all reality, I feel like that's what we've been doing. I mean, that's like with Nate, that's what a big chunk of my role has been. And I'm not really managing Nate, but Nate came into this almost 2 years ago, or has it been 2 years? No, it'll be 2 years in January. Nate came into this never having owned a business before. Nate's an incredibly talented person. He's smart. He's dedicated. He's a hard worker. He's got everything that you want as far as a business owner goes, except experience.
Yeah.
And so a big chunk of my time over the last year and a half has been mentoring Nate and helping him gain that experience and working with Nate. And so, when it comes to managing people, even though Nate's a partner in the business, I have been spending a big chunk of my time managing, helping him gain that experience. And so, that's really what it's been doing. When Nate first came into the business, like we hired him and he's been like the muscle of the business. And I'm not saying this in any way disparaging to Nate, but I've been the brains of the business. especially
You're
at
the
the
guy
very
with the
beginning.
experience.
I'm the guy with the experience. And as time's gone on, Nate is, he's been using his muscles. He's been, flexing his muscles and getting stronger there, but he's also been developing his brain and developing that experience. And as time goes on, Nate's going to transition more and more out of the muscles of the business role and more into the brain of the business role. But that's taken a lot of time, and that's going to take more years to develop that fully. And that's where a lot of my time has been spent in helping Nate.
And that's when he usurps your place on the couch, Chris. And then I'm talking to Nate every week.
That'll be a benefit for everyone.
There you go.
Benefit for all.
Okay, so back to Eric. Shouldn't Chris or somebody be talking about all of the people issues that come up? And let me pause before you respond to that and say, I kind of feel like we have. Not necessarily every little thing that comes up, but you've talked about when, hey, we had to let a driver go, which, to be fair, this was a comment on episode 105. Maybe we hadn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, so to give Eric some, I agree with both of you. This comment from Eric was, I think, over about 2 months ago, maybe a little bit more than 2 months ago. Yeah. And I feel like he's got a valid point here. I don't feel like I've done as good of a job with that. I've been trying to do a better job since. And even before Eric made this comment, like this was something that was kind of nagging on me and my conscience a little bit, that we need to do a better job of that. I feel like we've done a better job.
Conscience?
Yeah, a little bit. Tiny one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been trying to do a better job, but I still think there's some room for improvement there. And I'll take that. I take that criticism. I totally, he's got a point, and we'll continue to try to do better there.
All right. Further from Eric says, somehow people, Chris's brother, others, invested capital in the company and presumably got partial ownership as a result. Shouldn't that process have been talked about in detail?
And I guess maybe I thought we had talked about it. Maybe we hadn't talked about it in as much detail as you like. So let me say a little bit about what the structure of the ownership is. So when we started Haulin Assets, so this Haulin Assets was born from essentially Motor Carrier HQ and my time at Motor Carrier HQ. I've spent years in the trucking industry helping truck drivers start their own business, go through the startup process, get in compliance with all the DOT regs and everything at Motor Carrier HQ. That was kind of my first business, and it is really kind of where all this started. And Motor Carrier HQ is owned by myself, my brother, and my dad. My dad and I bought a reporting agency that has morphed into Motor Carrier HQ 12 years ago.
Right.
We brought my brother on, and kind of similar to how we did with Nate, my dad, for the most part, was a silent partner until I got deployed with the military. He kind of came and helped manage things while I was gone. And then once I got back, he kind of still helped with, he wasn't fully retired, didn't want to fully retire. My mom was still working. And so he kind of stayed on board and helped a little bit even after I got back from my deployment. And then when he decided to completely transition out, we thought, well, let's bring in Chet, and he can kind of take on some of the day-to-day role, so I can still focus on growing the business. And
right,
some
this
other
is still
things.
Back in Motor Carrier HQ.
Yeah, so this is Motor Carrier HQ. So Motor Carrier HQ now is owned by Chet, my brother, my dad, and myself, and that's still today. And so when we decided to start Haulin Assets, Motor Carrier HQ funded it, kind of help with the whole process. And so because of that, it naturally made sense for the ownership of Motor Carrier HQ to really kind of become the ownership of Haulin Assets.
Right.
And so that's why Chet's involved. That's why my dad still has a little piece of it, and
of Haulin Assets.
And then I'm a part of it as well. And then we decided to bring on Nate, which we've already talked about. So that's really what the ownership of Haulin Assets is at this point.
Is a carryover from Motor Carrier HQ.
And then adding Nate.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So anything else, any more detail you want to get into on that?
One of the things that he talks a little bit about, and this is one of those things that probably deserves another episode, is, partnerships. And we had an episode that completely focused on partnerships. And it was one of the very first episodes, and maybe we dive into this again. But one thing that I want to talk a little, I'll just say one thing that I even mentioned in that first episode about partnerships that I think is incredibly important. Finding the right partner is critical for your business. And one of the things that we've done to try to avoid as many conflicts and whatnot in our partnerships is something that one of the Koch brothers said that I heard one time that I thought was really smart. He said, in order for a partnership to work, it's got to have three things: shared values, shared vision, and complementing skill sets. And every partnership that I'm a part of, and most of my businesses have partners in them, the ones that have functioned really, 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 really well, those three principles are there. And I feel like we've got that with Nate. We've got that with Motor Carry HQ. We've got that with iThrive Funding. Some of the other businesses that I've done, it hasn't worked out as well, and we've had to make some changes. And that's maybe one of those things. Like, I've got another business that I think would be a really good case study for what do you do when they don't work out as well. And we've had to make some changes there, and that's probably a good future episode that we can talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like something we can dig into. So let's move on. We'll put a pin in that one for a future episode. Eric goes on. Oh boy, does Eric go on. We got a lot to, well, actually, no, we've got a little bit more to get through. All right. The latest announcement about buying trucks was handled in an even worse way than the previous one, in my opinion. Rather than being transparent, we found out months after the fact that a decision was somehow made to buy several more trucks. I would have thought there would have been careful discussion and decision-making, discussions with multiple parties, each with different viewpoints, but all we got was a superficial announcement well after the fact. Apparently doubling the size of your fleet is no big deal, Chris. No, but point taken. It's a funny line, but point taken. I really think you should be talking about those sorts of things more. And again, I'll just interject and say, I seem to remember, again, from where I'm at in this chair, there was some of that hand-wringing about, oh gosh, COVID has messed up the supplies out there, you know, the supply of trucks for us, and we have to plan ahead, and we don't know when we're going to get them, and suddenly, you know, 3 trucks show up on your doorstep. And so when Eric says there should have been, you know, more discussion, more collaboration, there was that, but it was, you know, 9 months in advance, 12 months in advance, you know, before those trucks finally got delivered to you. At least that's my memory of it.
And I think you're right. I think we probably skimmed the surface of it, and we've definitely talked about it, but have we dove into it as deep as we probably should? No, probably not.
Right.
And so maybe we could do something. I think this is where another one of those sections of his comments where we probably need to dedicate a full episode to, and we can, what do you call it? We could do a postmortem. After the fact, let's go through and let's talk
or at least
about
post hoc. Nothing's dead here, Chris. We'll call it post hoc.
All right, we can talk about what we did, why we did it, what our thought process was. So I think that's a good episode to have it.
Yeah,
at some
absolutely.
point.
You know, and we'll do an episode where you know, you've helped me a little bit with spreadsheets, and I'll help you with your Latin. Okay, Chris, that'll be a full episode.
Important.
Full episode of Latin lessons. We'll dive in. Okay. So anything else on that one?
I think that's probably pretty good.
Okay. Again, we'll put a pin in that. So point being, with all this, thank you to Eric. It's if people go to Facebook and it's not deep down there. You just scroll down a little ways to episode 105, and there are a couple of comments from Eric on that episode. They're great comments. You know, so you can chime in there or on future episodes if you agree with you know, what he's saying, with what Chris is saying right now. But Chris, let's talk a little bit more about how things have changed, both with the business and with the podcast itself, and you know, what you've decided to make a priority and deprioritize.
Okay, so one of them is balance sheets. He talks about, hey, you're not posting balance sheets anymore, and yeah, that's true. And I think I explained this when I first stopped doing the balance sheets. One, it's just getting to do all of this, to do a profit and loss statement, prepare the episode. It takes more time than you'd think to get ready to record one of these. And I've just decided something's got to give. I don't think the balance sheet is, I mean, it's important, but it's not the most critical pieces of the financial statements of the business. And so that's just one of those things I decided to stop, you know, taking the time to publish. And that's it. It's my time.
Something had to give.
Yeah, something had to give. And that's it. That's one of them.
All right. And then this is something that I've had on my mind, but I know you threw it into this outline here about year-end financials that you wanted to talk about what's going on with those.
So one of the things he also said is we aren't doing year-end financials. He'd like to see what do our year-end financials look like after we've applied depreciation and everything. And I totally agree. I need to do a better job of that. My reason for not doing it is because I usually don't get the depreciation expense piece until like March or maybe April when taxes are actually due and my accountant gets to it. It's not something that I do myself. I don't calculate the depreciation piece. I probably should. At some point, I'd love to do it on the monthly basis. But again, that's just another one of those things that it takes time to figure out. It takes time to do. And I just haven't done it. I've been relying on my accountant to do it. And by the time it happens, you're 3 or 4 months into the next year and
feels a bit aged at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay. But like I said, it's been on my mind. That's a topic I would love to get into. So me and Eric are simpatico.
I need to figure out a way to maybe get the numbers from my accountant a little faster so we can do it at a more appropriate time and it makes a little bit more sense.
Your accountant is thrilled to hear that from you, Chris. All right. So Eric also brought up the idea, and this is something that, again, we brought up very early in the first 10 episodes when you were just buying the truck. The idea of, do you buy used or do you buy new? And you bought used for that first truck.
For the first two.
Used trucks. And then everything after that has been new. And so he was kind of calling out, hey, whatever happened to that concept? Have you run the numbers? Have you tested that out?
I need to. Yeah. And I've got it set up so that it won't take me too much time to do. It is something that's always like every time that I launch a new podcast episode, I kind of, I either have a topic that I know I want to address or I go through a list of topic episodes that I've kind of been keeping. And this is one that's on there. I need to do it. I plan on doing it. I will do it. I just don't have, it's not like one of the next 3 episodes I'm going to do.
Okay.
But it is something that is going to happen.
Okay. And then also along the lines of year-end financials, year-end goals. We talked about goal setting. Was it the end of last year or the year before? And so maybe some follow-ups on those
where
goals.
We're at on those 2022 goals. So that's another podcast episode that I think we'll do sometime in the next several months and just kind of revisit, okay, so how do we do on our 2022 goals?
Right. Yeah, Q4 seems like a good time to do that.
Yep.
All right. And then he brought up another podcast out there. What's it called?
It's called Blue Ribbon Logistics.
Blue Ribbon Logistics. There's your free shout out for the day, guys. No.
Yeah, they do. And I actually, they started about the same time we did.
Oh, okay.
And I've actually talked to Chris, one of the hosts on it a few times.
Whoa. They're really copying our format.
Yeah, same name and everything. Yeah. So he's a good guy. He's got a good name. It's a good start. And I like a lot of what they talk about and a lot of what they teach. It's different. They talk about the leased owner operator model. We talk about the independent owner operator model. I think what they do is smart, and I think you can gain a lot of really good knowledge from both podcasts. And so Eric's point was we should do a comparison between the two. And I think we've done that up to a certain degree. We've had an episode where we've talked about
the two styles of ownership, right?
And we've talked a little bit about some of those pros and cons, but a deeper dive into it and revisiting it would probably be well worth doing. And how we go about it's another one of those it's added on to my list to do a deeper dive into that. And it'll happen. It just may be a little bit.
And, in the meantime, hey, you're out on the road a lot. Go ahead and subscribe to both. Again, hey, there's your free plug.
There you go.
All right, I'm expecting my check in the mail anytime from Blue Ribbon.
From Chris and Larry, I believe.
Larry, okay, all right. So I want mine from Larry because he's the Craig of that podcast. All right.
I don't know if that's the case. I think Larry might, because Larry might be the Chris. More business. Like he's been around the block a lot more in business than Chris has, and Chris is kind of. Hopefully, Chris doesn't take offense to this, but like more of his mentee. Chris is. And Chris is smart. Like he's learned a lot, and he's like.
So what that's telling me is that the next phase of the Haulin Assets podcast is when I buy my truck, and you mentor me through the first year.
Yeah, and the student has learned more than the master.
That's exactly right. And you made 200,000 in revenue in your first year,
and you'll make 4.
And I'm gonna make 600.
6, okay,
yeah.
Good.
With one truck, truck, no problem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Keep those wheels turning.
Just wait for inflation to do its thing, and we'll see.
You'll be there.
So Eric did finish up by giving us a nice compliment, and we do appreciate that. This is how you give feedback, right, Chris? You sandwich it with that.
I do.
And so he said, "I admire what you're trying to do with the podcast. What you're trying to do,
yeah, well.
With the podcast. Wish you the best of luck." Well, thank you, Eric. We genuinely appreciate the comment. I've had a little bit of fun with the comment. I hope you don't take that the wrong way. I have a little fun with everything, frankly. But it's a great comment, awesome feedback, and it kind of has offered a soul-searching, if not course correction, then at least a checkpoint for us, right?
For sure.
What is this podcast doing? Is it delivering what we're hoping it delivers? And I hope that people will give us some comments and let us know what they're getting out of it, both positive and negative. We love hearing about it, right, Chris?
And I honestly really, truly appreciate Eric and the time that he took in making those comments, and they're well thought out, and he's got a lot of really good points, and it gave us a chance to do some soul searching and try to do better and try to improve. We should always constantly be trying to improve, and no matter in what we're doing. And sometimes it's good to get a little jab, a little poke to get you moving in the right direction. And I feel like Eric did that in a very kind, tactful way. And so thank you. And I hope to be able to hear, like you said, comments from other people, whether it's on that same episode 105 in Facebook or anywhere on the website. Let us know whether you agree, disagree with Eric, or if there's additional things that you'd kind of like to see addressed, and we'll talk about them.
I'll tell you, the first comment we're going to get, Chris, is this one went too long.
It's probably one of our longer episodes in quite a while.
It is. So after this marathon, I do want to thank not just Eric, but everybody else for listening, and for hanging out with us for, 3.5 years, Chris. Has it been that long?
Let's see.
I mean, you were
almost April of 2019, so that'd be almost 3.5 years.
You were old when we started,
it has been almost exactly 3.5.
How about that? Old when we started, and now you were truly aged.
Yeah, still beautiful though.
Venerable. We're calling you venerable, Chris. So go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. You can leave comments there. You can also do it on Facebook. Find us on Facebook. MotorCarrierHQ.com for the resources, the phone number that you can call to get a personal, over the phone resource. So all of that is at MotorCarrierHQ.com. Chris, thanks for going through the marathon episode with me, and I'll see you next time.
See you then. Thanks, Craig.